What's up, everyone? Deech here. Today, I'm breaking the fourth wall, just peeling back the curtain on not only a little bit of my own personal life and circumstances, but just also on what to expect from this channel going forward. So just be sure to stick around till the end, that way you get the full scoop and, you don't find yourself here in the dark here very soon. So, I can fully admit that I'm kind of a casual gamer nowadays, but that for sure hasn't always been the case. I've been a die-hard nerdy boy for as long as I can remember at heart. Literally some of my earliest memories are of playing the Donkey Kong Country series on the Super Nintendo with the other kids at family parties, or, playing Super Smash Bros. At the daycare center I went to. To put it in perspective, Pokemon hit America when I was in kindergarten, okay? I never really stood a chance. I was glued to the screen of a mobile device way before anyone had ever even heard of an iPod, let alone an iPod Touch, alright? All throughout middle school, I would spend most weekends with friends riding the massive wave of the PlayStation 2 when it launched, which just fully cemented my love of video games, if it wasn't already. Just games like Grand Theft Auto, Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi, Kingdom Hearts, and Final Fantasy. So basically, my own personal identity had been hugely molded by video games at a very young age, and that would just continue to be justified with the massive cultural significance of the Xbox 360. The weight of the franchises like Halo, Call of Duty, and Gears of War would lead to pretty much everyone my age being a fan of video games to at least some degree. Alright, so now we're gonna get into some nitty-gritty. So, when I was a senior in high school, my mother passed away. She had been struggling with mental health and substance abuse issues for years by that point. I had actually already been removed from her house, and I was living with my dad because of said issues. But, she was my mom, and you can imagine it was a doozy. So when that happened, I moved out of my dad's house, still by the grace of God, somehow managed to graduate high school, and then I had all the time in the world to sink into what I loved, and I did that in the most unhealthy way possible. So at the time, I had pretty much set aside single-player games, which is a shame, and I'll explain a bit more why in a minute. But essentially, online gaming had pretty much become the whole entire draw to me. I just wanted to escape from the world and just talk shit with my friends. And oh boy, talk shit we did. I think at this point everyone knows about the toxicity of old school Xbox lobbies, but if I could freaking talk. I'll admit it, I was 100% part of the problem. I was an 18-year-old boy with a lot of problems. It's no excuse, I realize that, but it is what it is. If coincidentally anyone that I hurt or offended or even maybe just annoyed is watching this right now, please do comment down below all the nasty things you're gonna do to my mom. I'd probably deserve it. But anyway, so after a couple of years of some just really degenerate behavior, one of my closest friends, who I was living with at the time, kinda called me out on it. He just pointed out how angry I was getting at losing. He pointed out how casually I was throwing out just some truly vile words at people, and, just basically held up a mirror at how toxic I was. And to be honest, I just brush them off initially. Actually, it's probably more accurate to assume that I just talk shit to them and then we just probably moved on. But I do vividly remember the moment it finally sunk in. It was right after the release of Black Ops 2. I was getting pretty good at Call of Duty by this point, which inevitably meant that I was getting all the more putrid when I was doing well in any given match. I mean, if you know, you know. But there was one particular night where I was just flat out stinky. dying left and right. Any kills I was working on just kept getting stolen from me. Basically, my KD ratio on a new game was getting tanked, and I got toxic about it. I yelled out some slurs, and I threw my controller as hard as I could, and instantly I knew that right there was the line. So what I had been telling myself at the time was that I had a few friends that were quote unquote worse than I was. Friends who would put holes in walls, break Game Boys, controllers, etc. Heck, one of my best friends actually literally stomped through an Xbox 360 while it was on an entertainment center more than once. Basically, I thought, I'm just talking shit here. I'm not actually causing harm or doing any actual damage to anything. And, luckily in this particular moment, I did have the wherewithal to throw the controller at a pillow on the couch across from me. And luckily the controller was unharmed. But, still, I could tell that this was getting worse and that I was on a trajectory that I didn't want for myself. So I quit. That was the last time I've ever played a Call of Duty game ever, and is also why I'm super reluctant to play any online shooter game to this day at 30 years old. And do you know what? It was up there with one of the best decisions I have ever made, because with those hours of time that I'd now cleared up for myself, I fell right back in love with video games again. Because the very first game I picked up was a game that I had heard a few friends praise for like probably a year or two by that point. It was Skyrim. You ever hear of it? Yeah, so I had just completely missed out on the release when I was still in high school. It came out right about this time as my mother's passing. I think I'd seen some friends play it some. I'd heard some people say it was cool. I might have even dabbled on it once or twice over those couple of years, but, I was just not giving it much thought. Like I said, at the time, I was just more so interested in playing games where I could talk shit with my friends, but now I was catching on to the unhealthy spiral that was keeping me on, so I figured I might as well see what all the fuss was all about. And boy, did I catch on fast. I mean, it's been out for well over a decade, and people are still fussing about Skyrim for a reason. So yeah, I would just ride this newfound love of the single-player offline video game experience until sometime in my mid-20s. You see, about 23, I started working for a small restaurant. It was really, at the time, just to make sure I had an income to pay my rent and whatnot, but after a little while, the owners pitched me on their vision for the business. Basically, they wanted to grow and franchise. They really liked my work ethic, and they thought that I had a good head on my shoulders. They wanted to keep me on board and find a spot for me in the long term. And since I never really had anything even close in the works career-wise ever before, I saw it as my best shot as an actual stable future, and I was sold. So yeah, throughout just the rest of my 20s, I mean, that was it. I would still play a little bit of video games like here and there when I could, but aside from the massive chunk of free time given to me with the COVID shutdowns, I was just focused on work. I ended up traveling the country to help open locations. I learned a lot about business. I really grew a lot as a person despite my best efforts. Still a troubled individual after all, and it definitely showed more than once, but the people there, they had the patience to put up with it. I admit, I did do a lot for them, but still, I was mostly just thankful that they were willing to put up with me and give me that chance. So yeah, it'd be a few more years, but in my late 20s, I once again found myself with a little more free time on my hands than I would have liked. I had just gone through the death of another loved one. It was the girl I was engaged to. It was an absolute fucking rock bottom point in my life. Completely devastating. My employers, who at this point had become almost like family, they hooked me up with a studio apartment close to the store that I was now managing. They even got me a used car because I was pretty much starting all over. One of the first things I did was I bought a PS4 from an employee of mine at the time, since my PS4 had been bricked. I downloaded Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy IX and began to escape from reality again like I did just when I was a kid. But only in small intervals now, because my biggest escape at this point in time became work itself. I mean, that was literally it at this point. I was just working in a restaurant on my feet for over 70 hours a week. We're talking, minimum 8 to 9, but more often 10 to 14 hour days consecutively, 6-7 days a week for a couple years after that. I was not taking care of myself on top of that either. I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking water. I mean, I was still smoking cigarettes for the first year of it at least. And that would continue until right after my 30th birthday. A week or two after, in the middle of the night, I had a massive grand mal seizure in my sleep. Now, luckily, again, by the grace of God, my current partner and I had just moved into a house together, and she was there with me, because I'm told that seizure lasted well over 6 minutes, and it would not be the last. So the story goes, the ambulance, she calls 911, so the ambulance comes to get me, gets me to the hospital, and I pretty much immediately started freaking out about how much this was going to cost me. God bless America. I cussed out the doctors, the nurses, the hospital staff. I guess I was just right back in the quote-unquote good old days of being an absolute menace while playing Halo Reach. But anyway, I demanded to be released. I unconsciously signed an AMA form. I went home and immediately had another massive seizure. So the same EMTs came to get me. They got me back to the same hospital. I had a third seizure. And then I just went full on beach on these poor people. I not only cussed everyone out again this time, but I guess I climbed out of the MRI they were trying to give me. I ended up fighting a couple of cops, I guess. My whole family literally emergency flew in from different parts of the country just to talk me down this time, to the point where I would let the hospital staffs do their jobs and take care of me. Because at the rate I was going, I very easily could have ended up brain dead, It was a mess. But anyway, yeah, that more or less brought my career to a grinding halt. I came back to work as soon as I was medically cleared to, but the business itself had fallen onto some hard times. Now, I'm not going to comment on the details of it, partially because I'm aware that the business has some ongoing legal stuff that it's dealing with, but I frankly just don't know anything about the situation, and honestly, I'm just trying to keep it that way. And, also, I don't want this to become sort of hateful, directed shit-talking situation by anyone who might get the wrong idea about my relationship with them. I am still grateful for their patience and their guidance throughout some of the worst times in my life, and I really don't hold anything against them. But anyway, that brings us to now. So once again, I am hitting a low point, but I'm not nearly as devastated this time. I know what I'm capable of. I know that I can get through this. I do have that urge to escape from reality a bit again, but I don't want it to become something unhealthy. And that is essentially why I'm here on YouTube now. I want to make the most of what I've got. I want to build a community of my own where I can bring my own insights and my own sense of humor to the table. Now, as for the future, like I said, I typically do prefer single-player games these days, but that's not to say that I don't still like online games. For example, right now, Path of Exile 2 is what I've been playing a lot of in my own personal time, so expect to see a lot more Path of Exile 2 content coming from me when we get a little closer to the launch of the full game. I'm super excited for Ender Magnolia. I am super excited for that Dawnwalker game. Dawnwalker looks like it could absolutely be my new favorite game. I will keep my nose so far up Dawnwalker's ass, I'm going to be able to smell what the devs are having for breakfast tomorrow, alright? Now, in the meantime, I'm just gonna keep checking out some games that I've missed out on over the last few years while I get ready to move to a different state next month. That's the big news. It's a super big endeavor, but I'm gonna be living with my family again for the first time since I was in high school, and I honestly cannot even put into words how much that means to me, guys. So, here in about a month, the long form videos are likely gonna dry up for a little bit while I get settled, probably no more than a week, maybe 2 weeks. For the subscribers, I'm still gonna be uploading shorts, I'm still gonna be live streaming, you're still gonna get all the love, I promise. Alrighty, so if you guys have any suggestions at all, please do let me know them in the comments below. I live stream every Monday night. Please subscribe to the channel to stay into the loop and to help me out with the algorithm. Am pretty new to this and I really could use all the help I could possibly get. You have no idea. But anyway, that's all I got for now. See ya.